We've woken up in another part of Scoresby Sound, and there's pretty much icebergs everywhere, pretty much as far as you can see. We're going to be heading out the zodiacs in and around the icebergs.
Good morning. Check out this thing. It's huge. I think this is our last landing. Do one of the communities tomorrow. We'll never get there.
There's plants everywhere. I've got to take some photos.
Okay, well then you'll have to get up all the rocky bit by yourself.
Oh, okay.
Okay, what do you reckon?
No.
No? You come with me?
Big man.
It's starting to rain, but even that can't put a dampener on it. So we're overlooking this glacier. There's a waterfall there. I'll try and climb a bit further up, get some more height. Paula's down taking photos of the flowers a bit further down. It's pretty rocky, a little bit loose underfoot. There's these low level clouds and mists coming down through the valley. Are just absolutely spectacular. Oh, let's see how high up the hill I can get. So I had to spend a bit of time taking some other photographs. Might have eaten into my time a bit too much. Made it to the top. It's stunning. It's just in time to go back down, get a couple of photos and then head down. It's our second last full day on the ship. It's our last landing, so we end up doing an extra landing. We're sort of in a completely different sort of area now, because we're now near Ittoqqortoormiit. Is that right?
No, I don't think so. We will know exactly how that is by the end of the day.
We'll keep trying that name, which is sort of a relatively large settlement.
Ittoqqortoormiit.
Ittoqqortoormiit.
Yeah.
Ittoqqortoormiit. And we'll keep trying that. It's pouring with rain. We've sort of got a beach landing this time, and we're sort of looking at some of the lowland areas here, down pretty much on the sound. Paul has decided why,
Why?
and I've decided why not. I've been wet before, I'll be wet again. I get wet, there's a hot shower here waiting for me.
Yep.
So it's pretty lax. We're going to keep the expedition team company. We have some shore break. It's raining, as you can see. It's fine. It's just steady. It's not heavy rain. There's not a lot to see here. It's a completely different sort of ecosystem. It's you know, just sandy beaches and inlets. So I'll go have a look around, talk to people, then head back. Very coastal, sort of rocky sand, big mud flap. Big group have gone across the mud flap to go to sort of just a little sort of gully. Been muddy before, so I don't need to be again this time. We're much closer to the mouth of Scoresby Sound, so there's not as much ice out here. There are the very big ones which go floating out to sea, but not like that iceberg graveyard that we saw yesterday, which was just completely stunning. They don't get as many bears around here, but there was reports that there'd been a bear come just to the inside of the village. They don't take any chances, they still post the sentries. Alright, I might head back, see how Paula's going. She'll be all tucked up and warm and enjoying herself while I'm out here doing the hard stuff. I think she's the smart one.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
There you go. Thank you. E52, please. Thank you. So,
No, I don't think so.
Ittoqqortoormiit. We'll get it right sometime. We wanted to see the Charcot Memorial. It was put here by the Danish. Charcot died, of course, in a storm between here and Reykjavik. Peak hour. Ittoqqortoormiit. No. Interesting place.
Yeah.
It's not a big community,
No.
but it's all higgledy-piggledy. It all looks neat when you're approaching it from the ocean, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
It's all a bit more higgledy-piggledy.
It's a bit more rustic when you're actually in it.
Mindful, yeah, we're taking some photos and those sorts of things, but it's actually people's homes.
Yeah.
You know, actually where people live, so we're just going to try and sort of tread gently. The giveaway rules we're not quite sure of. Ittoqqortoormiit. Ittoqqortoormiit. See, we can do it. Ittoqqortoormiit. Now I've lost it again. See the polar bear pelt?
Oh, good. No, I can't.
You'll need to look the other way now. Up on top of the container. Thank you. Thank you. You want some apple pie tea, Paula?
Have a little bit. Do you want some?
That's your last zodiac ride.
I know, it's sad, isn't it?
Last zodiac ride. Yes, please.
Tea that tastes like apple pie.
Dear guest, here we are underway. Hope you enjoyed your last call in Greenland and that remote and colored village. This meeting with the Inuit. We are leaving Greenland, heading to Reykjavik, where we are supposed to arrive tomorrow, very late evening.
G'day, we're David and Paula. After 40 years, we took a gap year from work, bought a van and did a lap right around Australia. And it was life-changing. So now we're trying to rebalance life, work, the van travel in Australia that we love, and still ticking off some overseas bucket list items. Now we're going to the Arctic. We flew from Australia to Svalbard. We got on a state-of-the-art icebreaker expedition ship. We went to the North Pole, took a dip, saw polar bears, even more polar bears, and now we're in the magnificent Scoresby Sound of Greenland. Hey, g'day.
G'day, g'day.
Oh, well, here we are.
Yeah.
The end of our trip. Look, thanks for joining us. A number of you have wanted us to do a bit of a review, a bit of a wash-up of the trip, and we said that we'd sort of share some of our experience on all of that. And I think it's just important to remind people, we're not a professional travel review vlog, and we're not professional YouTubers.
No.
So all of our ad revenue goes to charity.
It does.
We definitely don't get sponsorships or anything like that. This trip we had to pay for ourselves out of our savings.
Yep.
And we'll come to that, because a few people have sort of made some comments about the expense of the trip and those sorts of things, which is true.
Yep.
Right? And we'll get there. But we are more than happy to share our thoughts on it, and it's about our feelings about things.
Yep.
And if that helps other people with their considerations, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay. We tend to tell people straight up the front how we feel about things overall, and then the considerations. Overall, it was a fantastic trip, wasn't it?
Yeah. Seeing the polar bears.
Yep.
I enjoyed the scenery. Scenery is absolutely beautiful, and just the pictures won't do it.
That was probably
Justice.
that was probably the big surprise, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Meeting lots of new people from lots of very different backgrounds, and everyone was just so good and friendly. And we have made some friends.
And it's probably worth reminding people, this was a milestone birthday year for you, wasn't it?
It was.
And we sort of thought, well, what can we do that's a little bit different to celebrate it? And we'd done our big lap and all those sorts of things. And we are thinking about what our mix is going to be in the future.
Yes.
Because the big lap, for those of you who haven't seen it, you know, go back and have a look at that trip that we do around Australia. We were just trying to figure out how much overseas type things and what sorts of overseas things we'd want to do, and we sort of thought, let's just do something
Super special.
And it was a big decision. We had choices about a couple of the places that we went, and there's just no question that the North Pole just sounded special, didn't it? Yeah, and we'd been to Antarctica, not to the South Pole, but we'd been to Antarctica, so we thought North Pole, and we had a couple of choices. We could have done Northwest Passage, a couple of other trips we could have done, and we just thought North Pole. And if we're lucky, we'll see some polar bears.
Yep.
We got to the North Pole, and that was special because not many people get to do that.
No.
And we saw 9 polar bears.
We did.
We'll never capture it in the film. Actually, that pinch me moment.
Yeah.
When you're seeing them, particularly when they're relatively close.
And how quiet, like you're on this great big boat hanging over the side of it, watching or filming.
Yeah.
And the boat is just absolutely quiet.
It's a ship.
It's a ship, my apologies.
But it does. It goes absolute silent running, doesn't it?
Yes.
And everyone's basically, because you don't want foreign noises, you know, metallic noises and things, you know, spooking the polar bears. Because it's a little bit hard. You're on an icebreaker at the end of the day, isn't it? So, but it comes to a dead stop, and you're just watching these things. So you can probably hear from the tone of it. It's a special thing.
Yeah.
You know, would we have done it just to go to the North Pole? Probably not. But how many people get to go to the North Pole? Very few people get to go to the North. But the big surprise, I think, was all the other scenery, wasn't it?
Yes.
You know, the polar stuff, but the fjords, Magdalene Fjord in Svalbard, and then Scoresby Sound.
Yep.
Pinch me moment when we're paddling, you know, with icebergs and all those sorts of things. And we're from the subtropical city of Brisbane.
Yes, we're well and truly out of our comfort zone.
Yeah, the closest we get to an iceberg is when we're putting a few cubes of ice in the G&T. Yeah. And so I think it was a special trip.
Yes.
Wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Every other comment I think that we make from now on, even if it sounds a little bit critical, none of it will be negative, right? but even if it sounds like a consideration or criticism, within the context that we had an absolutely wonderful overall time. Probably me even a bit more than Paula, because Paula got seasick. You still made the most of it, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah. So if you've been watching the series and go back and you actually wonder why you had to put up with my mug a little bit more than Paula's, that's just the way that it panned out. So overall, brilliant time, and as we say, polar bears, ice, North Pole.
And lots of bird life. The bird life was amazing, and I didn't expect that, did you?
No, and yeah, like when you saw relatively early in the journey puffins
I know,
flying across the open ocean.
It was just amazing.
Whales?
Yes, whales.
So sperm whales, fin whales, humpback whales. And I think that's one of the things for us, the wildlife tends to sort of be a major feature of the sorts of things that we want to do. Overall, brilliant trip, and I hope you got that impression from the series. And if you haven't seen that overall, if you're just looking at the review, go back and have a look. That trip is made better by the people we're experiencing with, and not just the other passengers. So we were very fortunate on this trip because we had the same captain that we'd had on our trip to Antarctica. Just
yes,
purely
we did.
Same company, Ponant, and it's a French company, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. They're very good at what they do. It is luxe, right? It is luxury, and we'll touch on that a little bit because there are only 2 ships that go to the North Pole,
yes.
right? A Russian nuclear icebreaker, and that's not that available at the moment to most Western people. And it's reasonably industrial. It's out of Murmansk and back, and it's actually not that much cheaper than this. And this is a luxury icebreaker, purpose-built design, right? So yes, it has an expedition-y feel to it. It's not like the big, huge cruise ships that you see going around the Caribbean or going around the Pacific or those sorts of things. They're specialised for this, but it is pretty luxe.
Yes.
The captain was very good, and I'm sure a number of the other Ponant captains are very good.
Yes.
With Svalbard, we sort of knew his style from Antarctica, and I think he replicated that, and that is flexibility. Only the ice and the weather are masters. And around that, even though they have an itinerary, and yes, we were going to the North Pole and we were eking our way to the North Pole, and yes, we were going to go to Greenland, apart from that, the itinerary gets thrown out, right? It gets governed by the conditions and where they can get to and maximising the experience. The crew were just fantastic, weren't they?
Couldn't fault them.
No, the people who the hotel staff that looked after us, whether it was meals or whether it was the stewards on the deck to look after us, brilliant, absolutely brilliant people.
Yes.
And there's a mix of people, for all nationalities.
Yes.
They were all wonderful, and I think the expedition team were very good.
They were good.
Yeah.
Very enthusiastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on both the trips that we've done with Ponant, and we've done one other expedition type trip, I think that the expedition teams can make or break these things. They've got to be safe. They've got to be all those sorts of things. And I think given the nature of the voyage, they'll always err on the side of the safety and those sorts of things.
Yes.
But if they're prepared to stretch that little bit further within the capability of people, they can make the difference. From Rio, who was the expedition leader on our trip, down, they were generous with their time.
Yes. Very much.
Yeah.
You could even book them to have dinner with them so that you could talk about what they're doing and how they got to be on the expedition.
And
that was really good.
And some great stories, wasn't it?
Great story. The whole team were exactly the same like that.
But we experienced particular expedition team members just because of they happened to be the people who were piloting our zodiac.
Yeah, we were interacting with them.
Yeah. And Paula really wanted to do the polar plunge, so to Ood and the people who ran all that sort of stuff. And
thank you, Ood, for keeping me safe.
it was cold, wasn't it?
Oh dear.
One of the things that we didn't feature in this trip, and you never will really on our channel, but things like food, wine, drinks, the bars, all that sort of stuff, the entertainment, that was all good. Yes. Keeping in mind that this is not like a Las Vegas on the sea. This is not one of those sort of 1 week pleasure cruise around the Caribbean type things. So the ship is actually purpose designed to go into these locations. but it is very luxe. So you do get, once you get on board the ship, you've got to spend relatively little extra because the food, the wine, everything's included.
All included.
And it's all very good.
Yes.
Quality, and they'll do all sorts of things to help you on all that. But we don't feature that too much,
no.
Right? That's probably not why we would select that sort of trip.
No.
We could deal with a lot more modest in all that, and still have a brilliant time. The ship is brilliant. It's a purpose-designed ship. It's actually a bigger ship than the one that we went on to Antarctica.
Yes.
Le Soleil. You got to be careful when you have this conversation because it's a brilliant ship. I mean, like its facilities are first rate. And we lost a bit of footage for some reason. I could show you they've got an ice room and sauna and all those sorts of things in their wellness centre. They're not the things that we necessarily want in a ship, are they?
No.
When we went to Antarctica on Le Soleil, it was a smaller ship.
It was.
Yeah. And I think this ship, because it is an icebreaker, it is purpose designed, just that little bit more luck. I think that probably verges just a little bit more on being bigger than we wanted to be on. So absolutely nothing wrong with the ship. Brilliant ship. Okay, there's no question if you go on this ship, you're going to enjoy it. For us personally, I think we like Le Soleil and that size ship, even though they're not as capable a ship. They can't push as far into the ice as the icebreaker can. So I think the thing is, if you want to go deep into the Ross Sea, if you want to go deep into the North Pole, you've got to go onto something like the Charcot, and you'll enjoy it, and it's brilliant, all right? But that means it is a little bit bigger. There are a few more passengers, a couple more amenity areas, bit more luxe, and a bit more expensive. I mean that's just the reality of it. One of the reasons why we wanted to go to these places is that they are pretty pristine. You're a long way from human settlement in a lot of them, and it needs something like that to actually go there. So brilliant ship, because there's a cost to delivering all that, isn't there?
Yes.
Yeah. When we posted some of the earlier videos, a number of people asked a couple of questions, and a few people sort of said, look, we've looked online and this trip's too expensive, or it's too expensive for them. And I think for us, there's probably three things that we would single out in terms of being negative or downside considerations in the whole thing. And the first one, there's no getting away from it, is it?
No.
It's expensive.
It's expensive.
I think one person sort of said, you must be rich to be able to afford all of that. I suspect that we were probably nowhere near as well off as a number of
most of the people on that boat.
A number of the other passengers. I got no idea, right?
No.
I got no idea. It's not something that we get into other people's financial affairs, but there's no getting away from the fact that you've only got to look it up. It is an expensive trip. And in economic terms, is it worth it? I don't know. I don't know whether that's the equation. For us, we had to pay our own way. It came out of savings. It was very expensive. And I did mention to one of the captains, that for us, it was a very expensive trip. And to his great credit, he actually said for everybody, it's a very expensive trip. Okay, and it is. That'll be the first big threshold barrier for a lot of people looking at something like that. And I'll add some qualifications, because somebody also sent a message to me and sort of said that for that cost, they could do a lap around Australia. And I want to do some reality checks on that separately, right? Because for a lot of people, that's actually not true, right? So a lap around Australia isn't that cheap.
No.
Okay. Are you buying an economic equation, or are the things that are in your bucket list so important that you're prepared to stretch that little bit further for them? And no question, when we weighed this up, we thought, gee, we could do more Australia travel.
Yes, we did.
We could probably do 2 or 3 other pretty luxe trips into Europe or one of those sorts of places for this cost, right? No question. But then you've got to basically say, what's the price or the value to you personally of going and seeing polar bears in the wild? Yeah. In the wild, right? So for us, it was a stretch for sure, absolutely, right? Out of our savings, it was a big stretch. But so if you've just come to the conclusion that that's just not even in the financial equation. I mean, there's a couple of other options that you can have a look at. And this was more expensive than our Antarctica trip, and it's on the northern hemisphere and we're in the southern hemisphere, so it's harder to get to. So no question, let's just be absolutely honest, the cost of the trip is a big threshold issue for people, and you've really got to weigh up what the other things that you can do with your hard-earned dollars are. And I'll give a couple of qualifications. So I think that's the first and the most obvious downside negative. So still a brilliant trip.
Yep.
Right? We're glad we did it. We don't regret doing it.
No.
Okay. I think the second big negative was not the ship's fault, not Ponant's fault, not the destination's fault, but you got seasick, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah. It's a very stable ship, right? And we'll touch on seasickness, right, just a little bit separately. And you don't mean to get seasick, but some people just get a disposition to it. And you did really well, didn't you? You still try to maximise the activities.
Yep.
You actually probably enjoyed getting out on the zodiacs and getting away from it a little bit, yeah. But, you know, bottomless wine, bottomless drinks, as much food as you want, that's almost a negative, right? So much food. And Paula was eating green apples and and ordering your ginger ale, weren't you, at various times, and your ginger tea. So that's nobody else's fault, right? That is just the fact that Paula got seasick. And you could do the wrong thing, in my view. You could actually sort of say, oh, it wasn't worth it because Paula got seasick. Right. Well, how are you to know?
Yes.
Yeah. And you still maximised, you know, your experience, didn't you? And we won't dwell on it. It was very stable. It's a very stable ship. The ice tends to stabilise things, but the sea still does move.
Yes.
And the ship crunches.
Yes.
Right. Between that and the slight disposition, as we said in the videos, Paula has in the past had vertigo. So all those things we think might have combined to bring it on. And the only other thing, which is probably an Australian or an Anglo thing, and the Americans who are following and others might wonder why we raise it. But there is a big emphasis towards the end of this trip on tips, isn't there?
Yes.
Yeah, for the staff. Now, don't get me wrong, if staff have done above and beyond and all those sorts of things, then of course you always want to sort of give that little bit extra or that little bit of a bonus. Okay. We're Australian, okay, so we come from a community where there's an expectation that staff get a fair wage for the work that they're putting in, and this is an expensive trip. So you would sort of hope that a French company, Ponant, right, pays its people fairly or well. Right, so everybody on that ship should actually get a fair wage. I hope they do. I've got no idea, right? But we hope they do. And there's nothing wrong with a gratuity for that extra little bit of service and the people that particularly sort of looked after us. But I do think on these trips there is an expectation almost increasingly of American proportion tips and those sorts of things. And that's a bit of a struggle for us as Australians. I mean, it's not because we're tight. I mean, I think we more often than not tip at restaurants.
Yes.
And a little bit extra. But I think, particularly if you've stretched yourself to get there, you've got to actually remember that at the end of the trip, there is an expectation of gratuities. And what we did is we were always going to give a modest gratuity to the small handful of people who directly helped us.
Yes.
There's a whole heap of people, like if you throw some laundry into the laundry service, right, and get that back, and this was our second Ponant trip, so we were allowed to put a couple of pieces in each day, right, as part of the loyalty reward program. Well, I feel sorry for the people who are doing that sort of work, who are away from it, who aren't necessarily going to be the recipients of those tips. So we took an approach that we actually put some money into a central pool in the hope that people who indirectly helped us or we didn't see helping us
would benefit, yeah.
And I think it was almost apologetic. There were a couple of people in the hotel staff who had been lovely to us around, and we gave them a modest amount and we sort of explained this to them. And I think one of them actually sort of said to us that and it was very good. They actually just appreciated just that extra token, right? You know, one of them sort of says, but the other thing we actually enjoyed was that you were polite to us. You know, in our case, we tried to speak bad French to the French staff, bad Bahasa to the Indonesian staff. In the service industry, be nice to the people who are trying to help you,
Yep.
right? You know, and that's the number one thing. I think that's a minimum expectation,
Yep.
right? Be nice to them, you know, if if they're trying to help you, be friendly. They're not servants, they're
No.
service staff.
The service staff.
Yeah. If you've stretched to get this trip, it's a very expensive trip, and there's an expectation for that, in our view, that the staff should be relatively well paid. You know, hospitality staff are never paid brilliantly, but you know, but that extra bit of help. So just keep that in mind, because that troubled us at the end, because what's a fair amount? And if you're not mega wealthy, right, you can't flash lots of extra
Fair amounts.
dollars around, you know. So you know, and yeah, and for the people who aren't from Australia, you might sort of think, there you go, there's those
You
Australians.
crazy Australians.
You're terrible at giving tips, and I think we've got a bit of a reputation for that.
Yeah, but that's the reason why we're terrible.
But it is because our expectation is that staff are actually well paid, or properly paid, and that tip should actually be just that extra little bit of acknowledgement rather than part of their pay. They're just the three negatives or detractors. I think they're just realistic ones. The big lap. Some of the other trips that we've actually done, Alaska, Antarctica. Some people think these things are about the journey. You know, a lot of people talk about the big lap. That's about the journey. Some people think it's about the destination, and we probably lean more towards the fact that we're actually trying to go to particular places. But I think increasingly, and this is the big thing we got out of this trip, it's the experience, isn't it? All the hoopla when we get to the North Pole, right? That's just a bit of fun.
Yeah.
Jumping around, bit of a dance, you know.
Yeah, doing the countdown.
Glass of champagne,
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. It's a little bit of the theatre of all that. And that's really nice. I think it would have been underwhelming if you just turned up and they said, we're here. Let's
Congratulations.
go. Congratulations. You know? Yeah, and you need a bit of rah-rah in your life, don't you?
Yes.
When we went to the North Pole, once everything had sort of cleared away and we just drifted off the North Pole, you don't stay on the North Pole long because everything drifted. We'd got cold, Paula was going back to warm up a little bit. And I went out to the front and I just sort of said to people, this is what the North Pole looks like in the height of the summer. And I think that was an important thing for us, isn't it? Because we're not a political channel at all. We're not trying to convince anybody of anything other than trying to maximise what they can out of life. You know, because life is too short, you know, and as we say, it's not a dress rehearsal. There's no getting away from the fact that the people who operate in that environment, and I'm talking about the seamen, the captains, right, the maritime people, right? Yes, there's scientists and others, but just forget that because it's not a political statement. The polar cap is thinning, right? The ice is getting thinner. So for us, I think a big part of it was that we did want to see the North Pole. Yes, it was in the summer, right? But we did want to experience and see it while there was still a fair amount of ice there.
Yeah.
We do want to see some of those glaciers
Yep.
while there's there. We do want to see the polar bears while they can still get around the sea ice flows and hunt and do that sort of stuff. Because polar bears are getting scarcer. You know, the ice is getting thinner. Urban encroachment, not so much in Greenland, because it's still very, very basic and still a lot of wilderness there, but in a lot of places that urban encroachment is getting there and you're having an impact, and we're not tree huggers. I think that the experience of all this was a large part of why we chose that trip rather than some of the others, even if some of the others might have been just that little bit more affordable. It was a big deal. You know, when that polar bear stopped and fed the cubs, right, we're all going, wow, that's cute, you know, pictures and sort of, gee, wow, you know, like that. And I think one of the expedition staff who had a long experience watching and studying polar bears over his life of science and studying these things, and actually, I think he said that it was either the third or the fourth time in 30 years
He'd seen that.
He'd seen a polar bear feeding its cubs. As they explained, polar bears don't do that in sight of most people. They try to keep away from human beings and those sorts of things while they're doing it. They were all thrilled because what that for them meant was, that was a big tick, wasn't it? That,
yes.
That despite the fact that we are in a ship, you know, for a polar bear, it's still a bloody big thing sitting in their environment. You know, it's not the world's biggest ship, but you know, but for them, it is.
But she was comfortable.
She was comfortable. Everybody was being quiet.
Yep.
Well, most of the people were being quiet and respectful, and I think when someone got a little bit too exuberant or a little bit too noisy, the group just collectively went, hey, you know. That's the thing. Yes, there's all the wonderful stuff about the ship. There's all the wonderful stuff about the crew, but there's no getting away from the fact that it was actually just this major experience. If you want us to wrap it all up, it was just a terrific once-in-a-lifetime experience.
Yep.
The other thing that people ask us about, have we been to Antarctica, for example? So if you're interested in this sort of stuff, right, some people sort of say, I think I'd rather go to Antarctica, or have you been to Antarctica? We're fortunate for the same reason that yes, we love the travel around Australia and all those sorts of things, but we sort of thought, do you know what? We've actually got to go and see penguins and these sorts of things.
Yep.
In the wild.
Yep.
So we wanted to go to Antarctica. Well, if you're interested in this, put some things in the questions, and if there's enough people who ask about it, we'll talk a little bit more. We can do just a little bit more about the comparison between the two, if that helps you choose. And people sort of say, did you prefer Antarctica to the Arctic? You know, like, was it a better trip? Are they directly comparable? Yeah, they're comparable. They're both polar trips. They're both polar experiences. We probably... And Antarctica felt like it was a bit easier for us to get to, right?
Yes, right. Definitely.
Now, you can actually get expedition ships from the south of Australia down to the Ross Sea, right, and down and deep. But they're long voyages, right? You know, there's a lot of ocean time. So we actually went to South America, down to Ushuaia, crossed the Drake Passage, and sort of did that. And we also did the Falklands and did South Georgia. Yeah. I think that's the first thing. If you're in the northern hemisphere, it may actually be easier getting into if not the North Pole, the northern polar region, because you can get to Iceland relatively easily and relatively cheaply these days. And Antarctica, for those people, just might seem like the other end of the earth. Right? For us, Antarctica was a bit easier to get to. We had terrific weather. We basically had animals on pretty much every day, even the Drake crossing. For all sorts of reasons, it was a fraction more affordable. This is pre-COVID, okay? So it was a fraction more affordable. Still an expensive trip, but not as expensive as this trip. So pound for pound, animal for animal, day for day, in those beautiful and stunning environments, probably Antarctica shades the North Pole. No?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't really know.
You can't see a polar bear down in Antarctica.
You can't. Right? There are things that you cannot see. You can't see puffins.
Yeah.
But you do get a lot of interaction with a lot of wildlife.
Yeah.
And it's pretty spectacular. And the scenery is, again, absolutely beautiful.
And if you do a trip to Antarctica, there's more opportunities for landings.
Yes.
Right? Provided you are on a smaller ship.
Yes.
All right. So both poles are very regulated. So if you get a bargain basement cruise on a big ship, you're going to see it from the ship, but you're not going to be landing as much, if at all, on those really big ships. Once you start getting 200 people plus, it starts to crab back the amount of landings that they can do on a day with each group. When we did La Soleil, it was around about 200, and we were doing a couple of activities a day, you know, at least one landing, if not two. You had a choice if you could only do one or the other. Personally, we would say Antarctica over the North Pole. Only if you do the South Atlantic islands. So the Falklands and South Georgia, right? Because South Georgia is just brilliant.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. And for Antarctica to be better than the North Pole and brilliant places like the Scoresby Sound and the fjords and Svalbard, you've got to do those islands, right? Not just do the 10-day trip, in our view, to the peninsula and back. And here is a big consideration, because right now there is a real risk in all of those areas because there's a new strain of avian flu going through, and that could decimate those populations because they have not been exposed to these diseases. They're pretty pristine places. Well, and a good company like Ponant are more likely to actually say, I'm sorry, but on this trip, because the risk of us spreading avian flu into these wilderness populations, we can't go to those locations at the moment. Right, so
ask the question
and press about whether you can get into South Georgia and where you're likely to go. These populations of penguins and birds there, they are exceptionally susceptible to this, and it can be decimating
Yeah.
to them. So if we want them to be there for the long term, if we want an opportunity when that particular strain subsides and we want to be able to go back and have a look, obviously we don't want to do any harm. If you've got any questions about it, ask the questions. If you'd like to see a little bit more about that, we could probably knock together a short video and the comparison and do it. But I won't do it if it's of no interest. And the other question we actually get was, well, but for all that cost, I'd rather go around Australia. Some people sort of said for that cost they could go around Australia. If we had just one choice in life for travel, that brilliant Arctic trip, North Pole, and our brilliant big laps. If you only ever got to do one of those in your life.
The big lap.
The big lap.
By hands down.
We've asked ourselves the question, are they comparable? They're hard to compare, right?
Yes.
But if the issue is the experience, right, the big lap was life-changing, right? It wasn't the economic cost, and I'll come back to that in a moment, because the big lap, for most people, is not actually that cheap, and particularly if you want to do it comfortably.
Oh, and particularly if you're starting from scratch.
Yeah, but as an overall experience, all right, you're the best part, if not a year on the road, or frankly, even if you're only doing a half lap, right, and you're doing 3 months and using your long service leave in Australian terms, then very clearly the Australian journey, in a similar way to the way we did it, or in a troop carrier with a rooftop tent, whatever floats your boat. Yes, there are some brilliant places to look at. Okay, but I've got to tell you, in terms of its natural raw beauty, the two polar regions, like a Scoresby Sound or a Sierva Cove in Antarctica, or St Andrews Bay in Antarctica, as much as we love Australia and the places there are to go in Australia, and there's some brilliant places to go, right, you'd be hard pressed to find anywhere in Australia that's as beautiful as those places I've just mentioned, right, in the world. But as an overall experience, detached, not having to worry about work, just, meeting and living with people all the way around the country, free camping, pristine skies in the centre of Australia.
Oh yeah,
right,
and stars at night.
Yeah, exactly.
They're unimaginable.
Yeah, as an overall experience for us, if you want the straight up, as frank as we can possibly be, comparison between those two. If that was the only choice you had, one or the other, the lap. We hope to do different forms of travel into the future.
Yes.
We hope to do a lot more Australia travel.
Yes.
Okay. And not all of us are living full-time on the road. I mean, as Paula said, if you're starting from scratch like we did, you are not doing a lap of Australia cheaper than our polar trip, right? And I think we all get sold a pup sometimes, because there's some really, really good content on YouTube. Brilliant content about laps around Australia and people who are living in their vans and doing all that sort of stuff. And some of them are really good. Some of them are just really good presenters and good content. So not criticising that. But here's the reality check for all the rest of us normal people. Okay, you don't get heavily discounted vans, right? Which some of them get as part of their sponsorship deals. And I mean heavily discounted. You don't get to turn a van over every 12 months,
no,
as some of them do. It's not a business, you're not getting a return on it, right? And as much as some people try to make some money by being on YouTube and that sort of stuff, most people don't make money on any of that. If this is just a dream, and it's a great dream, and we'd encourage everybody to have that dream.
Yeah.
But if you're sort of saying, I've got to start from scratch, that means I'm going to have to buy a new car, all right? Mm-hmm. Well,
a towing car.
A tow car, yeah, tow rig, right. You're not going to be much under 100,000. Sure, you might have a slightly smaller van, you might get something like a Ranger or something like that, but you're, even before you do modifications, even if it's not a brand new car, you're $70,000 to $100,000 before you do the mods. If you want a new car, and even the most common tow rig out there, which is probably one of the Land Cruisers or something like that, you're 150,000 in the hole. And then you're still doing modifications. So for a lot of those influencers, some of those rigs that have got their sponsored canopies on the back and all those sorts of things, some of those rigs are close to $300,000.
Some of them, not all of them.
Yeah. The van, right, even if you buy a relatively modest van now, caravan, and yes, you can do it cheaper, right? So yes, you can do camper trailers, yes, there's all sorts of ways that you can do this if that's your bent, but if you actually want the comfort as we did for the caravan, you're not going to have change out of $100,000. And increasingly, if you look at the top vans that are being presented to you in some of those YouTube channels, I'm sorry, they are $150,000 to $200,000. And then if you have a look at any number of channels, even people who've got their rigs and all that sort of stuff, who are doing their costings, like, so we didn't have a budget when we did ours.
No.
But for people who are trying to do the costings, fuel, accommodation, food, and food's all more expensive, they're all $90,000 plus for the year's travel. If you're starting from scratch, you're going to be in the hole for $300,000, even if you've got relatively modest car with basic mods, relatively modest caravan, and the cost. You're not going to get much change out of $300,000,
No,
right? For
potentially,
a 1 year trip. And yes, you've still got your van, your car for other trips, that's all true.
Yep.
That is significantly more expensive than the polar trip.
Oh yeah, we could have done quite a few more.
we certainly could have done, at least for the cost that we're sunk, we probably could have done 2.5, I think we estimated. But the difference is the experience, right? One is for the whole year, or longer, and one is this mega mind-blowing experience, but for shorter periods, of time. I think that's all we're going to cover. If you've got any questions, put them in the comments.
Yep.
If enough people are interested about some of those comparisons, ask the question. I'm happy to knock something up with the content that we've got. If people aren't interested in it, then I'm not going to do it, because the reason we've shared our videos is so that family, friends, others can actually experience some of the stuff that we do. Now remember, 100% of our YouTube ad revenue does go to charity. And please watch, like, subscribe, share. And even if your bent is the lap of Australia and the overlanding and all those sorts of things, have a look, because these places are brilliant. In all that, if there are any more questions, ask them. We'll just try to answer them in the comments. But I think in summary, brilliant trip, absolutely brilliant trip. It's on par with anything that we've done.
Oh, yeah.
Separating it from some of the other things that we've done is very, very, very hard.
Yep.
Okay. You've heard it from us. If you only had the choice, a big lap, the way we did it, or that one, well, then it would be the big lap. But we just hope that we get to do a combination of things.
Yes.
Over time. You've heard it from us. If you only got the choice between the two polar regions, North or Antarctica, particularly from Australia, right? For us, Antarctica, right? So that's the wrap up. But this was still a brilliant trip, still a brilliant experience. Was it worth it? For us personally, on a life journey, yes, it was.
Yes.
Yes, it was, right? Financially and economically, does it add up? Probably not.
No.
Right? So if it's only about counting the cents that you spend, probably not. And certainly not for us, right? Because, that money's hard earned, that sort of stuff. But as an overall experience, just simply brilliant. I think Ponant were very good. No sponsorships. We don't have anything from them. If you're interested in doing a trip like this, all right, we can't offer you discount codes and those sorts of things. We're not
sponsored.
Yeah, we're not sponsored. Because we've done a couple of trips with them now, we have a loyalty status with them, as you do with any company that you do more than one thing. And I'm not going to put it up as a general thing, but if you actually look at all of this and decide that you do actually want to do a Ponant trip, go to our Facebook page, DM us, right, or ask the question in the trail, but direct message us. And if you are a subscriber, contact, because we can get a small discount for you by referral, right? So I think it's just $500 off. So these are expensive trips, but $500 might make.
It's $500.
Yeah, it's $500. And what do we get in return for that? I think we get a credit of the same amount for a future trip, which we may never do. Right, it may never come to fruition, but that's only for the sake of disclosure. I think in that circumstance, for subscribers and people who have been along the journey with us and helped us send some money to charity and that sort of stuff, we can give you that code. And I might add, if you know anybody else who's travelled with Ponant, they might be able to do the same thing. So we've never approached this thing for personal gain. If that makes a difference or if that helps out, we're more than happy to do that for subscribers.
Yep.
Next episode, we visit Reykjavik. We see puffins, taste some local food, and Paula gets seasick again, this time on land. Again, thanks for joining us. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and remember, 100% of our YouTube advertising revenue goes to charity.